Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I'm your host, Karen E. Osborne, and I am so delighted that you are back with us today. I can't wait to introduce you to my guest. Her name is Hope Gibbs. Hey, Hope.
Hello, how are you?
I am really good today. Thank you. How are you?
I am great, and thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here.
Oh, I'm delighted. I'm delighted to have you. Hope and I got a chance to meet maybe a couple of months ago,
Mhm.
but we met like this. We haven't had a chance to meet each other in person, but Zoom, we like Zoom. Zoom is all good. So let me tell you about a little bit about Hope. Hope is a debut author who is already garnering so much praise for her book. Here's a sample of a review from Where the Grass Grows Blue. A page turner from the beginning. The author's writing was like paint on a canvas, creating a vibrant picture of life in Kentucky. Through flashbacks and introspection, Penny's character development was flawless, and I was invested in all her relationships. If you are craving an immersive storyline, this book provides the perfect escape. That is so good. Congratulations.
Thank you. I was thrilled, beyond thrilled with that review.
Yeah, me too. I really like, there was a lot of good reviews, but that one
Yes.
was great. So tell us about the premise of this book.
So, Where the Grass Grows Blue is one woman's journey to either accept her troubled past by embracing the power of forgiveness or risk losing a second chance at love in a small Kentucky town. It's a quintessential Southern experience full of family and friends, food, and old loves. So, that's a little bit about that's just kind of my elevator pitch, so to speak, for my book.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Uh, so I was recently, some of you heard me say this if you watch faithfully every week, which I hope you do. I had the opportunity to speak to 4 classes of 11 and 12-year-olds. And their teacher invited me, and so 4 different times, and to answer their questions about writing, because they can't buy my books, they're not appropriate. So one of their questions was, how long did it take? And I decided to answer by asking them. I said, well, how long do you think it takes to write a book? So the shortest was 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and the longest was 4 years. So how long did it take you? I know it wasn't 2 weeks to
Yeah.
write your book.
Well, so I didn't actually start out to say I'm going to write a book. I was a stay-at-home mom at that time for 20 years, and I have 5 children. And when I first went to college, I started realizing I was going to be an empty nester really soon. So a friend said, "Why don't you start journaling? Journal down your feelings and your goals." And that lasted about a week because then I started noticing I didn't care about what I wanted or I wasn't writing about my feelings. I was creating an entirely new character. And before I knew it, I was starting to write scenes and I had little, side characters, and my journaling to try to figure out my next chapter ended up being 29 chapters and an epilogue. And so from the time I started writing, when I finally got my direction, because for a while I didn't have a direction, but I was in church of all places, and our minister mentioned the name Bob Dylan. And you don't normally hear Bob Dylan's name on a Sunday from the pulpit. And he said the words, and it was a song title I'd never heard of, and it said Tangled Up in Blue. And I'm like, I now know my direction. I know where Penny Crenshaw, this character I've been just kind of hanging out with for the last few months. And I started writing. And from that point, it was 1 year before I wrote the end. And then I realized, oh, I've written a book. Everything's great. And I realized all it was telling. It was all telling, no showing. So then I had to go back in, and I spent a year just starting to read books because I didn't know what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Books on showing, not telling, the emotional thesaurus, which is the greatest book ever.
Yes, it is.
It really is. And then I started feeling like, okay, maybe I should find an editor. So a year later, I had an editor and I did 2 content edits because I wanted it to be perfect. So from the time I started to the time I got a book deal was 4 years.
4 years. So
Yeah,
one of my students, one of the young students was right on the money.
right. I wish I was 2 weeks. Believe me, I wish I could write in 2 weeks, but no,
Yeah, it
it's a
wouldn't have been good in 2 weeks. It wouldn't have been a very good book.
in my first draft, I hardly recognize it. The story is still the same, but it's amazing when you really start digging into books and articles. It really does change everything, and so do content editors. They are incredible.
I agree with that. I really appreciate having a good developmental editor to help me. So tell us about Penny from the point of view of, a girlfriend. Is she, what are her strengths? What are her weaknesses? What is she like? What makes her really interesting?
So when you meet Penny, and I'm not giving anything away, this happens in the first chapter. Penny is living in Atlanta, Georgia. She lives in this area called Buckhead, which is a very
Mm,
nice, nice neighborhood. She's living just, the stay-at-home mom life, thinking everything's okay until she stumbles across her husband's affair and he leaves her and sends her divorce papers, and her beloved grandmother from Kentucky dies all in the same week. So she's got
mm,
a lot going on. So her life is completely changing. So then the next chapter, you fast forward the next year, she's still trying to figure out who she is. She's no longer Mrs. Teddy Crenshaw. She's not a full-time mom anymore because she's divorced and she's not with her children. And she's very hesitant. She has this mantra of never poking the bear. And she learned that when she was a young girl. So she doesn't want to go back to Kentucky, but her grandmother, Ruby Ray, has left her this house and it's just sitting there. And it's time for her to go back. And very much like in your book, Reckoning, she has a best friend who just speaks the truth, and she's pretty blunt and says it's time to go back. And she pushes her to go back, and Penny does go back to Kentucky. But there's a lot there. She had a very dysfunctional childhood, a father who was an alcoholic, mother was kind of the Elizabeth Taylor of the small town, married 8 times. She doesn't really want to go back. But she also doesn't want to go back because her best friend, the keeper of her darkest secrets and the boy who shattered her heart, still lives there. And of
mm.
course, they're going to run into each other. So I'm not going to give away. But Penny is very, she has to grow through this journey. She's very regimented, partly because of her childhood. She's very, kind of has a little bit of body issues because she also some things from her childhood. But through the course of this book, she starts realizing being so unforgiving when someone has hurt her has really cost her 20 years of her life. So it's
Wow.
really about she's not only got to forgive others, she's got to forgive herself. So
Those are good lessons, though, aren't those? Those are so relatable, so
yeah.
much that we can, our readers can relate with. So that sounds really good. Hi, I have a quick question for you. Do you like murder mysteries? I have one that's a page turner. Tangled Lives. Two women, one older, one younger, get together to solve a mystery. I hope you'll give it a try. One of, this is your first book, your first novel, and it's doing so well out there in the world, which is going to be so exciting. Many of our viewers are authors. I mean, mostly we have readers, but readers are and writers are readers. So if you could give a little bit of advice, what were some of the lessons? You mentioned one of them, the importance of having a content editor, and the importance of learning your craft, right? That you
Mhm.
you invested in that. Is there anything else that you would, any of the lessons that you would share that might help someone out there who's just getting started?
Well, the first lesson, and I was asked to write an article for a women's magazine recently, and they asked me this exact question. And the first thing is just do it. If you've got an idea, open up that laptop or grab a notebook, and you're never going to get further. You have to make that first step, meaning you have to just do it. And then I would say, as you're writing, find a writing community. I did not have a writing community when I wrote my book.
Mm,
I found that community when I started querying that book. I joined the WFWA, which is the Women's Fiction Writers Association, and that changed my life because writers are the most generous people
yeah.
I've ever met in my life. They give incredible advice. They give you your time. It's not a competition. They want you to succeed. and things like this, watching your show, and really just learn everything you can about publishing. And I didn't know what I was doing when I started, and I started querying at the end of July of 2021, and by December of 2021 I had a deal. So that was I was very lucky, and there's a lot of luck to this. But I would also say, I know it sounds odd, but set up an author website before you start querying, because
Mhm.
agents and publishers are going to see if you have a footprint out there. Start blogging. I didn't start blogging until after I got my deal, but blogging is a great way to hone your craft. A, you're under a deadline. B, you're actually letting someone read your words, which is kind of intimidating. And so I would say do all that. Get on social media, write reviews for other authors, make connections, because they will help you. And I have been so blessed to be helped by so many authors. So that's what I would say. Find a community.
That is such excellent, excellent advice. I My previous career before being a novelist was that I worked in philanthropy, and mostly in higher education, and then with other non-for-profits and development people, fundraisers, people who raise money to help children, and they are the most generous people in the world. So my first career, I was surrounded by generous people. And then to start this career and find out that it's exactly the same, just caring people. And so I underscore, find a community.
Find a
People
community.
people are willing to help you. People will read. People will give you advice. People will do all kinds of things for you. So that is such excellent advice. And I loved what Hope said. She said the first thing. Do you remember what the first thing she said? Just do it.
Yes.
That's writers write, correct? So as a reader, because all of us are avid readers. Can you tell us about a book that really changed something for you, that had an impact on your life, on your reading life, on your life?
I think the first book that really changed my life was Where the Red Fern Grows, when I was a child.
Mm,
And it
mm,
truly made me love reading. Now, I didn't like to read out loud because I was not a very strong reader. I thought that I wasn't a great reader, but I loved to read. And that made me truly appreciate a book. Charlotte's Web, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. But as I got older, you start losing that because you have to start reading what they tell you to read in high school
yeah,
and in college.
mm,
And then
mm.
after college, I started reading again. I started picking it back up. And then when I had kids, and Ellen Hildebrand, she is my all-time favorite author. She is the reason I started writing, because I wanted to be the Ellen Hildebrand of the South. So when you read one of her books, you know it's in Nantucket, you know what you're getting. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to show people. A lot of people don't know a lot about Kentucky. And, they might think, oh, there's horses or there's a basketball team, but there's so much more. And so she really had a huge impact. But I read all kinds of books. I read nonfiction, I read political, I read thrillers, I read historical. But I do kind of lean a lot into women's fiction, though.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like me. That sounds like everything but the Kentucky part. Sounds like me. All of my stories take place in New York because I'm a New Yorker, and that's what I know, even though I live in Florida.
Exactly.
So what book have you recently read that you could, and it doesn't even have to be recently read, a book that you would love to recommend to our audience?
Well, first off, you know how I feel about Reckonings, your book. I
Thank
absolutely
you.
loved your book. It was fantastic. I also just recently read The Last Beekeeper, and that's by Julie Carrot Dalton. And
Yes.
yeah, it's a very interesting premise. The honeybee population and all the pollinators have disappeared. And it's the story about this one woman. She was the last beekeeper's daughter. And it's a dystopian future, but it's also not completely out of the realm. So I really enjoy that. I like a little apocalyptic, tale mixed in there. That one's great. All That Is Sacred by Donna Carbone. She is a new debut novelist. I was able to be one of her ARC readers. Fantastic. It's
Mm.
coming out in June. I really enjoyed that.
Say the name again.
It's All That Is Sacred, and her name is Donna Carbone, and
Okay.
it is a fantastic book. It's a group of women that were best friends since high school, and one of them has passed away, and she is trying from this kind of limbo to get them back together so she can help her own family grieve. So it's a wonderful book. So I can't
Mm.
recommend that one enough. And again, I read The Soulmate recently. That was by Sally Hempworth. A nice thriller. But yeah, so I read probably a book a week. I love to read.
Book a week. That's impressive.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I actually have my book now, so I finally have
Look at
my
that.
cover.
Oh, no, show us
So
again. Lift it up
yes,
again. Look at this great cover.
yes,
Yeah, the grass grows blue. Yeah,
yes,
that's gorgeous. So are you working on something new?
I am. I am almost finished. I'm actually in my last chapter of my second book called Ashes to Ashes. Takes place in Nashville. It's almost kind of like a thriller women's fiction. You're trying to figure out why something happened. I'm not going to give too much away. And then I've already mapped out my third book called Tobacco Road. And that one's going to be historical fiction, which kills me because it's set in 1973.
I know.
That's considered historical fiction. It kills me. But that one is a woman going back to Kentucky and she's having to try to save her family's tobacco farm. But in 1973, women can't open credit cards or have a book, a checking account without a man. So it's also kind of a play on, where we are now as women. Have we taken for granted what we've known for the past 50 years? So
Yeah. And some of the things we're losing.
exactly. So
Yes, yes. Oh, this is wonderful. So I know people are going to want to follow you. They're going to want to know how they can find out more about you, certainly where they can find your book, but what's going, find out about what the books are that are coming and all of that. How can people follow you?
okay, so it's authorhopegibbs.com. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Hope Gibbs. I'm even on TikTok. My daughter talked me into TikTok last summer. I'm still trying to figure that one out, but I'm trying to be hip. But and also you can follow me through my publisher, Red Adept Publishing, or my audiobook. So my audiobook is with Blackstone Publishing, so with their audio division. So just hope if you Google Hope Gibbs, I will pop up.
That sounds wonderful. So, Where the Grass Grows Blue, right? That is an audiobook and a hardcover and
It's
a
going to be
Kindle
audio,
ebook.
yeah, audio, ebook, and audio. So yeah.
Excellent. Do you feel good about your narrator, your voice actor?
Okay, it's funny. I just heard the sample today. So they sent me two narrators they had narrowed it down to, and they asked opinion, and they actually went with the one that I suggested. And today, I just clicked on there, and there was a chapter sample, and it was a very interesting moment to hear my book because I see my book. When I go back through it, I see how I wrote it. I see the scene in my head, how I
Yeah.
developed. But to hear it, that was a little different, and it was exciting, and I'm thrilled with it.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you have a good narrator and audiobooks. I'm a big consumer of audiobooks. I buy books, and I listen. And so having a good audio actor is a gift. So
Yeah.
you can find Hope Gibbs on all of those platforms. I hope you will buy her book or listen to it, buy the physical copy, download an ebook, and then let her know. Write a review, send her a note. And you could mention that you met her on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Until next time, everybody. Bye-bye.